Welcome to the Area Podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance. I'm your host, Eric Smith. On today's episode, we are joined by Rick Sanders, president of the Iowa State University Research Park. Home to over 130 companies across 550 acres, the Research Park serves as a regional hub for innovation and is playing a key role in the development of CyTown. This episode is presented by Flynn Wright, Iowa's premier full-service advertising agency, serving clients from coast to coast for over 40 years. Experts in crafting stories that sell, Flynn Wright prides itself on helping brands drive performance and stay one step ahead. Rick Sanders, president of the Iowa State University Research Park. How are you doing?
Fantastic. Excited to be here.
That I know. I appreciate you quickly saying yes to the area podcast and coming on to talk about all things Iowa State University Research Park. Now I'm going to prep you. I have a lot of questions for you. And the thing that I appreciate when I reached out and asked you, I appreciate your email style because it was, I wrote a paragraph or a paragraph and a half kind of introducing you. You said, yep, anytime. And then I emailed you again and you said, I'll talk about anything. So now I got to hold you to it.
I'm all in.
Okay, so I feel like we got to start kind of baseline here and talk about the Iowa State University Research Park. Let me rattle off some stats, but then I want you to add some color commentary to this. So 130 companies, over 2,000 employees, a lot of student interns across all of the companies that are there, 20 buildings, 550 acres. What is the Research Park?
A research park is a vision of a place where innovators can innovate. So when it was created 36 years ago, it was intended to be a space where some of the intellectual property that was being developed on campus. Let me start with that. Iowa State University, the first land-grant institution, a world-class research institution, especially around the things that are ag and farm related, right? Yeah. When you think of vet med. But what had happened is there were a whole bunch of ideas that were being created on campus that had nowhere to go, nowhere to test themselves in the marketplace. And part of the deal of being a land-grant institution is to create, share, and apply knowledge to make Iowa, in this case, and the world a better place. And we needed a pathway to do that. So that was the humble beginnings. Since then, we've transitioned to anybody and everybody who wants to innovate. And if they need some kind of function that Iowa State University has, we want to be a place that they can locate to help further the disruption that they're trying to create within the world, right? Yeah. That's what innovators do, is they disrupt for a really positive result.
And so over the past, several years, you referenced, 30 plus years of it being in existence, but it's really grown in the past 5 to 10 years. And part of that has been the emphasis that Iowa State has put on, innovation. That's part of their branding now, but certainly entrepreneurs, and you referenced the land grant part of it. So ag is a huge part of the research park. But what's interesting is It's Iowa State, it's the public component of it, but all of these companies, for the most part, they're private companies as well, and that collaboration within.
Yeah, it's trying to find a way to let good ideas benefit the masses, right? And the best way to do that is to get it into private hands. Here at the Alliance, you guys work every day knowing that by bringing a great new company to town, it makes the entire town or entire region better, right? We feel the same way about the Research Park and Iowa State University, right? Good ideas that aren't really explored to see what they can become, they never reach their potential. And so we want to have as much of that as we can. Fortunately for us, for the Research Park, companies are really buying into that. They're really understanding that working in a silo, even if you're SUCUP, is not ideal, right? You need to broaden out. You need to innovate. You need to find the latest and best ways of doing things. You need to find that next generation of talent to continue what you're working on, and we're a great place to do that.
So how do those connections begin? Like, obviously, there are a lot of already established connections between university research and private companies, but the definition of innovation is like always looking for the next thing. And so how do those, like those new ideas, how do those get connected to the businesses within the research park?
Yeah, I mean, so most of the time it is a company has an itch that they aren't quite sure where it is or how to scratch it. They just know they're missing something. And now, especially over the last 5 years, as we've built momentum, somebody says to them, hey, you ought to check with the ISU Research Park. And so we try really hard to understand all the things that are going on at the university, all the expertise, all the programming opportunities, everything that's happening, so that when a company comes to us with a problem that they may not even be able to define, we can start to plug them into different areas until we figure out what the problem is, and then we try to come up with a solution. For us, by and large, right now, it's talent. I mean, talent is 95% of what we do, trying to identify the best and the brightest of those 9,000 students that graduate from Iowa State University every year. And it's getting earlier and earlier that companies need to make connections with those young people if they want to have a chance to get them. You know, when I finished school, you finished and you started sending out resumes and you hope you got a job. Right. Today's generation, if they don't have a job 6 months before they graduate, they're really uptight about it. And for the companies, if they haven't identified that next generation of workforce that they're hiring 6 or 8 months ahead of it, ahead of their graduation, they're missing out. And so we've really put in a try it before you buy it kind of system where these companies get to come in and really identify the young people that they're most interested in and put them to work. Hopefully put them to work on real issues, real problems, real corporate culture kind of things, and then identify the best fits. And we've got some companies that are doing a fantastic job at that, and we've got some companies that would like to be doing a fantastic job at that.
So then what's your role in between all there? I mean, obviously some of them, they're just going, and it's working really well. I mean, you're kind of in that facilitator role. I mean, as
we're the connector.
Park.
We view ourselves as connectors, right? We are connectors that happen to own real estate. We happen to provide office space. We happen to do all these things that look like a pseudo commercial real estate, not for profit. But really who we are is a connector and a problem solver. Our attitude is, so we want innovators. Innovators are special people, right? We want innovators to be innovating as much of the time as possible. And the reality is the barrier to innovation for innovators is the mundane things that we all have to do in order to innovate. We try to knock those problems out. And so that's our sweet spot. Over the last half dozen years or so, we have really leaned into not thinking of ourselves as a real estate portfolio company. I mean, we've got $100 million in assets in real estate, right? But we don't think of ourselves as that's who we are. We think of that's what we do in order to be who we are, and who we are as a connector and a problem solver.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey to the research park. How long have you been president of the research
Coming
park?
up on 6 years. Isn't it interesting how I just picked out 6 years as kind of that timeline?
I love that. But you're not originally from Iowa.
Nope.
From Alabama. Is that correct?
Originally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then talk a little bit about your path, and maybe give us a quick bullet points of your path before you got to your board of supervisors role, because I want to unpack some of that a little bit too.
Yeah, so I am the epitome of the person who never knew what they wanted to be when they grew up. I still don't. And I'm, a handful of years away from retirement. I still don't have any idea what I want to be when I grow up. But I have had the most wonderful, eclectic professional experience. All the way back we left Alabama in 1997. But even all the way back to our time in Alabama, had this wonderful kind of problem-solving professional experience. I'll start at the end in Alabama. Before we left for Montana. So I think I'll start with my wife is a rock star. So she is currently the Senior Associate Athletic Director at Iowa State University, but she's also been Dean of Students at the University of Maine, Associate Athletic Director at Montana State, Associate Athletic Director at UAB in Birmingham, which is where we met. And so in the process of following her around the country as her career advanced, I've had these unbelievable experiences. So at 30 years old, I had taken a job as the assistant general manager of the Birmingham Barons, which is a minor league 1AA baseball team in Birmingham, most famous for it's where Michael Jordan played his minor league baseball. And so I saw the pathway, at 30 years old, I'm going to be the assistant GM of this minor league pro team. I'm going to work my way up to general manager. And then who knows, eventually I'm going to be general manager of the Cubs, and away we go. And Callie gets a call from her home state school, Montana State, and they wanted her badly to come home. And I could see that it was something she wanted to do, and so made a choice at that point in our lives that was going to be our priority. And so didn't have any idea what I was going to do or who I was going to become, and got to Montana, and within 2 weeks I had been hired as the general manager of a junior A, basically minor league, young people hockey program. The building was not completed yet, so this would have been July. Building wasn't completed. We had a first home game on September 14th. Building still needed to be built. 0 season tickets were sold, no marketing done. We ended up really going hard and having great success for a multitude of reasons, but ended up selling out 34 of 40 home dates, became the largest beer retailer in the state of Montana that year. That led to becoming president and commissioner of that same hockey league, which was a fascinating job, having teams spread out across North Dakota, Montana, and British Columbia, and running that with this accent, and probably even more so because that's almost 30 years ago. And so then Callie gets offered Dean of Students at the University of Maine. She had just gotten her doctorate, and so we're moving again. And I should say, all with 3 young children. We went to Montana with 3 kids under the age of 5. We go to Maine with a kid who's a 4th grader, and then on down. And so spent a couple years at Maine, and I actually served as an interim associate athletic director at the University of Maine through a weird set of circumstances, and it was the first and maybe only time that Callie thought I had a better job than her, and so we couldn't have that. So then the Iowa State position came open in 2003, and we headed this way, and we've been here ever since. So you mentioned you want to unpack the supervisor role a little bit. That's interesting how I got into that. From the time we got here, almost the time we got here, 2005 to 2015, I was also the commissioner of the Midwest Collegiate Conference, which was an NAIA conference made up of the schools like Grandview and Mount Mercy and William Penn and St. Ambrose, and that was a fantastic role to have for 10 years.
Yeah. So, you zigzagged the country here. Professionally, you and your wife and an entire family from the South to the Northwest to the Northeast, and now here in the middle part of the country.
Unbelievable adventure, and I think based on based on Callie's aspirations to continue to advance and challenge herself, and then just the way I'm built, great strength, great weakness. I am largely unafraid. I am willing to dig in. I'm unafraid of what I don't know. I'm unafraid of what I can't do or shouldn't do. And so it makes me this person who's willing to try anything, and it's ended up working out pretty well for me.
So then what prompted the jump into the public sector? So you were Story County Board of Supervisors for a long time. 3 terms or thereabouts, but making that decision is tough. Like how did you get into making that decision? Like, yep, I'm gonna go for this.
Yeah, in the mid to late 2007, 2008, I didn't particularly like the way things were going. I had really been preaching to my kids, who were then, early high school, middle school age, that you should leave things better than you find it. And so for me, turning 40 was an opportunity to look in the mirror and say, okay, you're telling your kids to leave it better than they find it and use their talents to really help society. Have you been walking that walk or not, right? So to myself, and I decided that there was more that I could give, and that I had this set of talents that I thought could be useful. So started exploring getting into politics. I didn't know anything about county supervisors, but was encouraged to learn something about them, and decided that I would foray into that. ran in 2008 and lost, which was a hard. I mean, anybody who tells you that politics is not personal has never had their name on the ballot. Yeah. It's very personal. It's really intense. Even then, I think it's probably worse today. I'm sure it's worse today. But even then in 2008, it was really intense. And I'm not a great quitter. And so I lost in 2008 and did some soul searching and decided to run again in 2010 and was fortunate to win and then fortunate to serve with so Story County has 3 supervisors elected at any one time, and I was fortunate to serve with a gentleman named Paul Toot, who has now passed away, and Wayne Clinton, which a lot of people here in Ames will remember Coach Clinton. Yep. 2 of the best people you'll ever find, and really had a blast serving with them for my first half dozen years or so as on the Board of Supervisors.
I mean, it's a tough gig. I'll be honest with you, working in the public sector, everything, and these are good things. Hard doesn't equal bad, but everything is on public display. Your decisions, how money is spent, it's all out there, and you have to back it, you have to defend it, you have to make decisions that at times can be in gray areas, and there's no right or wrong, but that one way or the other, it could be unpopular. It could be popular one way and unpopular another way, and you have to wrestle with that. What were some takeaways from your time?
Yeah, that serving with really, really good people, with really honorable intentions, matters, right? And so I'm afraid we're in an era right now where we don't see as much of that.
Yeah.
Decisions are decisions, right? Those
Yep.
50-50 calls, half the people are going to be happy and half are going to be unhappy. It's not different than balls and strikes in umpiring or a block charge call in basketball. You do the best you can, and then it is what it is. But when you're doing that with really good people that you trust, that are truly trying to do what's in the best interest of their constituents, then it's ultra gratifying, or I found it to be ultra gratifying. And sadly, I look at what's going on nationally and what we see some at the state, and heck, even some of what we see locally, I'm not convinced that's always happening today, and that's a little frustrating, especially since I got to do it the way I think it's supposed to be done. Yeah. Not meaning that every decision was good or correct, but I knew whether it went for me or against me on any decision, I knew that it was because of the right reasons.
Yeah. Isn't it? I find it to be incredible. I had the experience. I worked for a public organization, and I was in charge of the communications, and I learned during my 5 years in that role. I describe it as I could see what communications does when it ripples across a community, and social media certainly played a role in that. And it's tough to describe, but you certainly have takeaways from those moments of things that you learn, and you learn how to manage things a certain way, and you have to learn that some decisions, they just are what they are, and you have to be okay with it. And I always found that, if we came to the what we found to be the right decision based on all the variables, then we could live with it. And that's really all you can do. But I do find it, you said that it's probably very different today than what it was back then. And it's incredible how social media certainly has accelerated those types of decision making. And could you do it today? Would you want to do it today?
Well,
Politics, maybe?
I have no interest in doing it today. I have the utmost respect for those who choose to do it, and I hope that most of them are honorable in their rationale for doing it. But I accidentally ended up in the perfect position for me. Again, this is without ever really setting a pathway for myself or understanding what the next move was going to be. I was just always trying to leave it better than I found it, and it's led me into this fantastic role as president and director of the research park. Which, this is what I want to be when I grow up. So it works out pretty well.
You got there.
That's right.
So today, what is the research park's reputation across the state, and maybe even let's go even bigger than that, across the country? Because I don't think it's overstating the fact that the research park certainly is known across the country as a hub for innovation, agriculture.
Yeah, I think that's especially true today. I think that you're a marketer. CyTown is that big shiny object
We're
that
gonna
a
get
lot
there.
of people a lot of people all over the country are paying attention to. Being the first one of its kind is one of those things. But there's also recognition that the ISU Research Park has been and is truly a special place when it comes to that ag precision innovation. And I think people around here would be surprised at how much the ISU Research Park is talked about. We had a visit from the University of North Carolina here in these offices 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
We had visit from the president of Kansas State a few months ago. There are a lot of different people paying attention holistically to everything we've got going on in the region, because the reality is, a market our size, and you start with Ames and then you go to our MSA, we're not a very big market, but we're punching way above our weight class. The research park, I'm proud to say, is part of that we're punching above our weight class. But we've also got clearly Iowa State University and the Ames Lab and the USDA and the work that the Alliance is doing. I mean, so you and I could do a whole show of the Alliance and Dan Culhane and I starting to position what was then the AEDC to become bigger and more than just what it had at that point in time. Dan's done. I mean, you could do an entire season on the impact that Dan Culhane has had on our entire region.
Well, I can say that when we are talking to companies that are looking to land in the region, or if we're just doing a general presentation, the research park is a part of all of those because it's essential to the economic development landscape of our region. Certainly Ames, Iowa State is core to everything we do, and as a result, the research park is core to everything that we do, and that ripples across all of our communities, all three counties.
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer in that life is not about what happens to you, it's about how you respond to what happens to you. And so for the research park, I'm going to use COVID. I had taken the job in 2019, and then in 2020, about March of 2020, COVID hits, and it absolutely fundamentally changed our world, but specifically the way commercial real estate was viewed. And so there were a lot of commercial real estate entities, including research parks around the world, that tried to dig in and continue to lean into this new model that we didn't know what it was going to be, using their old systems. And we were smart enough and brave enough to try a new model, and that model was connection, right? And how we do that. And so I'm really proud that we're one of the arrows in the quiver anytime we're talking about this region and the impact that we can have. And I think it has everything to do with us leaning in on what our role is. It is so much more than our 550 acres and our 20 buildings and our 1 million square feet. It is about the impact that those spaces can have in conjunction with the assets that our region has. And I paint our region to be much bigger than just the Alliance, right? It gets down into the Des Moines market, and everything that we have here in the cultivation corridor and frankly in all of Iowa, we all need to be leaning in to make sure that we're fully utilizing those assets in order to grow our economy for everybody.
This episode of the Area Podcast is sponsored by...
You have a story to tell. That story has a job to do, to be seen, to be heard, to sell, to find inspiration and insight, to use persuasion to change behavior, to turn strategy into tactics, tactics into action, to sell. Nobody does that better than Flynn Wright.
Continental Manufacturing Chemists, located in Huxley, Iowa, is a leading producer of oral care and animal care products for major brands across the United States. Since 1961, they have been a manufacturer of toothpaste, mouthwash, along with shampoos, conditioners, and many other products. As their company continues to expand, they are seeking passionate individuals to join their team, and they are hiring across all shifts. What truly sets Continental Manufacturing Chemists apart goes beyond their advanced equipment and diverse product lines. The heart of the organization lies in its commitment to its team members. In an era where many organizations face challenges in recruiting and retaining talent, CMC has managed to grow significantly because they put company culture first. You can learn more about Continental Manufacturing Chemists and apply online through their website. So one of the big announcements from last year that came out of the research park was a new building, the Alliant Energy Ag Innovation Lab. And, that's a collaboration between, obviously, the research park and Alliant Energy, but the Digital Agriculture Innovation Lab from Iowa State. So talk about that and talk about the impact of that building, not only on the research park, but to everything that's happening.
Yeah, so you have to start that conversation, first of all, with a huge thank you to Alliant Energy. If Alliant Energy doesn't lean in and, frankly, put their money where their mouth is, and we experience this in our entire region, what's happening out at Prairie View Industrial Center, Alliant Energy has been a great partner. In this case, this project doesn't even get off the ground if Alliant Energy is not willing to explore something that is outside the box. But then the second one is Dr. Matt Darr from the university is an absolute rock star, and he's been having an impact for years and years and years at Iowa State, but his impact had grown so great that the spaces he was using, BioCentury Research Farm, which is just across the line into Boone County, he had outgrown his space, and so it was limiting the kind of impact that he could have for companies all across the board and students at Iowa State University. And so when the opportunity came for us to find a way to partner to build something that could enhance his program and enhance Iowa State University and impact companies primarily in Iowa, but companies in the ag space, it was a no-brainer for us to lean in and figure out a way to get it done. And then we did what we do. We were ultra creative. We tell our staff pretty regularly we're a true not-for-profit. We just also are not for loss. And so trying to figure out how to make all of that work sometimes gives us some flexibility where others don't have flexibility.
So in addition to, all the companies that are housed within the research park, I find it very interesting, and this is where these concentric circles come into play, but the Papa John Center for Entrepreneurship is located at the research park. Small Business Development Center is located at the research park. So talk about how these entities integrate with the larger plan of economic and business development at Iowa State and certainly across our region, because these are things that from our organization we interact with quite regularly as well.
Yeah, so I believe a really wise decision by Iowa State University about 10 or 12 years ago was to create the Office of Economic Development and Industry Relations and pull in the entities that were outward-facing from the university, but dealing in economic development issues. You mentioned a couple of them. The Papa John Center, SBDC is a great one. CIRRUS is a great one, specializing in working with our small and mid-sized manufacturers on engineering problems. And then the Office of Industrialization and Commercialization that controls all of the intellectual property generated from Iowa State University, along with the research park, pull all those together and put them under Economic Development and Industry Relations. We've got a fantastic Vice President. David Spalding is the Vice President of Economic Development and Industry Relations, and he has set a vision and a collaborative atmosphere where somebody can walk in the front door not really knowing what they need from Iowa State University, but we can find somebody on one of our teams who can help them with that problem. And again, viewing the research park as the connector, we love making those connections and making sure they're getting to the right spot.
Yeah. So we can't get through an episode without talking about CyTown. It's it's one of the most exciting things to happen for our community. Certainly in a long time, athletics is involved, but Iowa State University Research Park is also heavily involved and throughout the entire thing. So talk about the research park's involvement. And I'm sure I'll have a number of follow-up questions.
So our involvement from really day one. This was Jamie Pollard's brainchild, and he went to President Winterstein, and President Winterstein did what she does so much of the time, and she empowered Jamie and then very quickly brought me in and asked Jamie and I to lead this conversation of, is something like this possible? And so that was in 2019. And so from then to now, this thing has evolved into, we're moving dirt, right?
Yeah.
The groundbreaking for McFarland is in April of this year. We just put together the leases and the operating agreements for what the rest of CyTown is going to look like. We've got a fantastic development partner in Goldenrod. And so this thing is going to happen. Research Park is excited that we're going to be the leaseholder for everything. We're going to lease all the property. We're going to help with building all the buildings. We're going to be Iowa State University's eyes and ears into the program. And it's going to benefit our tenants and our community as we think of the kinds of amenities that attract people to live, work, and play in a place like Iowa State. I would say let's add to it. We want people to come and visit, and we want them to stay as long as they can stay. But the only way CyTown works and the way this thing has been set up, and I just encourage people to remember what the Iowa State Center, so that is Hilton Coliseum, Sheeman, Stevens Auditorium, and Fisher Auditorium, along with Jack Trice Stadium, what that development has meant to our community over the last 50 years. And now, like a lot of things, right? A lot of deferred maintenance, a lot of functional obsolescence. Can we bring the Iowa State Center back to what it was intended to be? This place that draws people from all over the Midwest, right, to come and stay and play and shop and do the things that we need to do. And can we take care of some of these spectacular buildings? CY Stevens is one of the great auditoriums anywhere, but it's got a lot of deferred maintenance issues and functional obsolescence that we got to take care of, and that takes money. Where is that money going to come from if we don't figure out a way to generate new dollars to help offset some of that? CyTown is all of that, but for our community, every time we can draw somebody to spend a little more time in and around Ames, Iowa, it's good for all of Ames, Iowa. We need to benefit Main Street. We need to benefit Campus Town. And to do that, we believe putting something like CyTown right in the middle of it all, that with the bright lights and the huge activity, is really going to impact that.
Well, this is certainly going to do that. I mean, this is going to be game-changing for decades to come. The Board of Regents recently approved the 30-year development agreement, and Jamie recorded a video, and there's more renderings, and it outlined 8 buildings, retail, food and beverage, office space. One of the coolest things was that outdoor music venue. That's going to be pretty exciting, and I really appreciate that because that's a really community-minded thing to install into this CyTown development. There's going to be a huge conference center and hotel, and all, starting, you said breaking ground here soon. How does it get, so let's go back to like 2019. So there's this idea, clearly there's this space between all the entities, Hilton and Jack Trice, that we can be utilized, and it certainly can be the hub for activity. But then how do you get from, okay, we should do something, how do you start exploring what this could actually be? Because this could go a million directions.
Yeah, the answer is one step at a time, and you look at anything and everything you can. So I, in one of our early group meetings, I suggested that really what we ought to be doing is we ought to be figuring out what the real positives are. I mean, Power and Light District means something special to the people of Central Iowa, right? And so clearly we're not downtown Kansas City. We're never going to be downtown Kansas City. But what components of that are special and matter, right? And then the other one we looked at, Jamie's got great contacts all over the place. Jamie took a group of us up to Green Bay to visit Titletown, which is a very similar kind of idea. It's got the same same acreage. It's supposed to do some of the same kinds of things for Green Bay as what we were thinking of for Ames. That was a fascinating visit. But when you think of those two, downtown Kansas City and kind of rural Green Bay, if you put those two together, so I say if those two got together and they had a child, we believe that child would be CyTown. And so part of the deal is really embracing what Ames, Iowa is and has been. And you talk about the music venue, that's an absolute no-brainer for us, because there was a long stretch of time that Ames, Iowa was one of those great little music venues where you could have performers that would spend their whole career coming to Ames, Iowa, and they'd be playing an 800-seat auditorium, and then they'd go to Peoples, and then they'd end up in Stevens, or, and ultimately they'd be playing Hilton or Jack Trice Stadium, right, in a few cases. And you could have, there's a story, and I wasn't here, so I don't know if this is true, but there's a story of Huey Lewis and the News coming to town at the peak of their popularity and playing Hilton in the last set of the night. They said, hey, when we get done playing here, we're going to go over to Peoples. Why don't you guys join us? And so Peoples was then on the corner where CVS Pharmacy is located right now in CyTown. And they said there was a line from there all the way back to the towers, right?
I believe that.
In order to get in, you hear Hootie and the Blowfish kind of doing the same kinds of thing. And so why wouldn't we lean into this idea that we can have great live music again, right? It's not starting something new. It's just bringing back what was in Ames, Iowa.
Well, we have the student population. We have that student engagement, I think it's a wonderful idea. So you're a fast-paced guy. You're a get-it-done kind of person. This was back in 2019 and very conceptual. And, of course, you get those peaks when you can show off some of the renderings. But between those moments of when you can show off early concepts and then, more recently we had this. I mean, we were putting pipes in, picking up concrete and putting in infrastructure. The pace of construction is very low. Does that drive you crazy?
No, because I'm a believer in incremental progress is progress, right?
Okay.
And Rome was not built in a day, and so a lot of times people will get frustrated in the moment. Things look like they take a long, long time.
Yeah.
Right. For me, you mentioned the Alliant Ag Innovation Lab. That was a 4.5-year process to get that done, but now that it's built, all anybody knows is that it's done.
Yeah.
Same thing is going to be true with CyTown, right? It's excruciating for a lot of people in the middle of it or at the beginning of it, right? The hardest step is always that first step, starting to do something. But once it gets done, people aren't going to remember what it was like before it was here.
Yeah. I remember there was the early concepts, and maybe you can respond to this, because this is the nature of social media, but I heard Jamie outline and explain it, and it made 100% sense to me. So one of the first tenants is the McFarland building, and that's going to be breaking ground soon. And clearly there's a relationship between athletics and McFarland, but there were other reasons why that was a really good first tenant. And I want you to explain a little bit more about that.
In order to make any entertainment site like this really go, one of two things has to be true. Either the limited number of events that you bring have to be so big that everybody can make their year based on those few events, or in a place like Ames, Iowa, you better have that day-to-day steady stream of activity to go along with what are some really good major events. And so for us, what we need down there is we need as much activity as we can possibly get. It's beautiful that it's commuter parking lot and there's 2,000 cars a day that park there every day during the normal school year. But we need more activity than that. And so how do you generate that? A place like McFarland that has been a fantastic partner for ISU athletics through the years and really had a strong desire to be located in close proximity to the athletic facilities. But if they're going to bring 1,000 appointments a day to the site on a normal day, that's activity that you need, right? I mentioned Titletown earlier. It is not a surprise that in the middle of Titletown is a small medical center, right? That's what this does. And so, everybody Social media. We started with social media. Social media is such a fascinating thing. Everybody has the answer. Everybody thinks they have 100% of the facts. Everybody thinks their thing is the most important thing. The reality is when you take a truly holistic approach and try to make sure that you can have success for everybody involved, or at least give everybody involved the opportunity for success, it means choosing what needs to happen, and you don't get 100% of anything. McFarland is such an exciting project, and it's going to be one of the key anchors to what CyTown looks like at 1 p.m. on a routine Wednesday afternoon.
Correct. And we think about it differently from our organization, but it's everyone is in their routines. They get up, they go to work, or, they're doing kid activities, and as much as the community is integrated together, we still at times find that there's this disconnect of people who are residents and live in the community struggle to go to campus town. And then how do we get campus to come to downtown? Mm-hmm. And this is the same thing where you're building an infrastructure to make that more normal for people so that when there are food and drink opportunities or there is a music venue and there's that activity, it's not foreign to go there.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, again, If CyTown does not make our entire community better, if it does not make our entire community draw more, have more experiences, have more opportunities, then we have missed the boat on CyTown. I think it's going to do all those things. But I think the revitalization of downtown and Main Street is one of those key things that does that. I think continuing to figure out the sweet spot that is campus town and how we can really make that a robust campus town matters to all of us. Heck, I think Somerset, its success matters to all of us.
Correct.
I believe that what we're doing at the Research Park, we're building our first multi-use space, right, which will be commercial and retail on the ground floor, and it will be residential up above. I think what's in there and the kind of activities that occur are going to matter. It's one of the reasons that we just built a new tennis facility for Iowa State University tennis. All of that matters to our community, but having kind of that center hub, both geographically and probably from an event perspective in terms of how many people it draws in CyTown, I think is going to benefit everything that surrounds it in our entire community. And if we can bring the Iowa State Center back to something resembling what it once was and what it meant in the whole Midwest, not that we're going to get to where it was in the 80s in the Midwest, because it had no competition. Now we've got robust competition, but we can offer some things that nobody else can offer.
Correct.
But we need to lean in on that.
Well, this will be one of those things a decade from now. I know it's not going to take that long, but a decade from now, certainly less, communities are going to be coming to Ames and asking questions and talking about, well, how did you do this? Because we need to do this. I mean, this will be one of those projects that is not only has a regional impact, locally and regionally, but nationwide. I mean, there's going to be a lot of university towns that are going to be coming here.
Yeah, there already are.
At this.
There already are, right? We're, there's a couple of universities. My friends in Knoxville like to claim that they're out first, but they're not. We were first. Michigan State's got something going. There's multiple places that have things going, and then there's multiple entities that claim they have something going. Like I just read somewhere that our friends down in Norman, Oklahoma, think they're building an entertainment district, but it's 16 miles from any of the venues. Right? Okay, that sounds like a great thing, but that's entirely different than what we're talking about right here in the heart of everything.
You have a professional win from the past week?
Professional win from the last week. Yeah. I think the fact that we are moving dirt again on, I said our mixed-use facility and now our first pure residential space. A lot of research parks around the country have been chasing residential for years and years. City of Ames has been so great to work with as we truly become a live-work-play space. And so I'm so excited to see those go vertical, and I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
All right, Rick. Thank you again for being on this episode of the Area Podcast. Rick Sanders, president of the Iowa State University Research Park. Thank you.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Anytime.
So for those listening, if you like this podcast, we certainly encourage you to subscribe and share it wherever listening. There's always great information. In this one, I hope you learned something about the Iowa State University Research Park and certainly about CyTown, which is a really exciting development. This is the area podcast from the Ames Regional Economic Alliance, Personal Stories, Professional Journeys.